Hi, everyone. I'm Summer,
I'm Carrie.
and this is Hopelexia Podcast.
Join us to talk about sex, drugs, and self-improvement.
But I found when I was being dismissed most of the time, it seemed to always be from clinicians who were operating under the assumption that one, I was exaggerating, and two, if I wasn't, this was my fault, that her behaviors were my fault.
Yeah.
And so then anything I suggested was dismissed. Anything I reported about previous behavior, or even behavior like things she was telling me on the phone when she would call me was assumed I was exaggerating, or things like that. So until they would get to the point where they were like, oh no, where they had dealt with her enough, and they were like, oh, and it finally revealed itself, and then they would then they would be okay, and then of course discharge her, so I didn't deal with them after that. But up until that, I found most of the time it seemed to be the underlying problem was they thought they didn't believe me about what was going on.
Yeah. I mean, and that's pretty much par for the course. And it's, it's interesting because I hear a ton of parents report what you just said, which is, you'll be telling people and telling people and telling people and telling people, and then they'll go, that's what you're talking about. Ooh, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. Like,
right.
And that's
they call me
common.
after a month or so, and they're like, okay, so this happens, and now I get it.
Yeah.
And be prepared for her to come home Tuesday. But I mean, that's even once we got to the point, I'll say, even once we got to the point of my refusing to pick her up, I had to go do the exact same thing with the district attorney, and I had to testify in court because it was always, they always operate under the assumption that this is your fault. The kid is acting out because of something you're doing. This is a target child and you must be abusing them even if all the other kids are fine. And like literally have to go convince every single person that that's not the case before they'll do anything. And I mean, that's maddening, because how are you supposed to ever get any help if you're having to run the gauntlet every single time?
Well, and this is the crazy thing, right? I know one of the parents in the group, and I personally know her, and we talk on the phone. And anyway, she typed up when her child was in wherever he was at the time, right? She typed up, okay, so here is everything you need to know about my son's behavior pattern. It is going to go like X, Y, Z, right? She listed it all out in chronological order, like in the beginning, like at the first couple of weeks, you're going to call me and be like, there's nothing wrong with this kid. Why did you send him to us? Right. And then she sort of, spelled it all out. And then, 6 weeks into his stay there, they're like, so at first it seemed this, and then, they just repeated her entire list. And she's like, I sent you that in an email. Like, I told you that was going to happen and you're not doing anything. Like, why are you surprised when the pattern I laid out for you that he's been doing his whole life? Why are you surprised that that's what happened? Like, that's what I gave you the email for that reason. Like, it's in writing. You could look at it at any time. It's not, you don't have to try to remember what I told you verbally in a conversation, right? Like, you can go look at the email and see it in print, written in black and white anytime you want. And the fact that you're not doing that, like, you're not even using the tools I'm giving you. Like, why are you bothering to ask me about my kid if you won't even listen?
Right. Yeah, I was told over and over, we like to start from square one and not take anything from previously into account, just because there might be something that was missed or a misdiagnosis. And I'm like, okay, that's what you want to do. But it's like we have the same pattern for years, but go ahead. You know better.
Yeah.
It just wastes so much time.
It does. I mean, and that's These are children.
Mm-hmm.
These are children who, through no fault of their own, are wired this way.
Right.
Right? I mean, I think it just, it goes back to that scene from Mindhunter. Do you think there could be a cure?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like he really, there's, I've heard, by the way, from more than one adult with psychopathy, that, and one of them is David Wood. You can listen to his videos on YouTube, although he's sort of really anti-Muslim, or anti-Islam, so I don't necessarily like that at all. Or not, it's not that I don't necessarily know, I don't like that at all. But he beat his father to death with a claw hammer at the age of 15.
Hmm.
And one of the things he said is that, there was a point after, his dad was no longer around, that his mother had a new boyfriend, and the boyfriend would beat the shit out of her. And he's like, no, you have to be clear. At the time, I was fully grown. I'm 6'3", however many pounds, like I had 50 pounds on the guy, and I had a gun. I just didn't stop it because I didn't care.
Hmm.
And so he ended up eventually going to prison, and and he says something which I've heard other parents, or people with psychopathy echo, right? Like I've heard that. I've heard that from more than one person, that what they are hoping for. Oh shoot, she thinks I asked her. Whoopsie. I should remember to mute my my device.
Yeah.
I used the wrong word. I shouldn't have. But anyway, I've heard from, like I said, more than one adult with psychopathy who believe in Christianity and believe in Jesus because they cannot wait for the day when they can be reborn in a body that works and feel God's love, because they cannot.
They haven't felt it before.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like, I'm looking forward to the afterlife, so I have a body that works, a body that will allow me to feel those emotions, a body that will allow me to feel God's presence, a body that will allow me to feel loved. I mean, that is just.
And that was one thing my daughter had said a couple times there towards the end, was she would start it by saying, nobody has ever loved me. Like, okay, why do you say that? Why do you think that? Because I don't feel it. And people say when there's love, you feel it. And so that she was struggling with that inability to feel that emotion. And she's like, but you're supposed to feel it, and I don't feel it. And so she was externalizing that as, you guys must not love me or I would feel it. But that's a very empty feeling of knowing that everybody else can feel this and I can't.
Yeah. Wow. You can't. I can't feel it, therefore you must not love me.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just absolutely
and to be
heartbreaking.
clear for everybody listening, I actually consider my situation is actually somewhat of a success story. Honestly, she began therapeutic interventions at 5. And that just happened to be because of the history of system involvement. And because I knew, I had known her as a baby and toddler. So I knew something was off. I didn't know what it was. And so because she was came to be in foster care, that was accessible to, okay, I'm going to get her into therapy and we're going to work on this. And
Sure.
so then, the therapist got to work with her, for years, and also with me and teaching me how to parent a child, and adjust expectations, because quite frankly, you got to go low demand parenting with a lot of
Yeah.
these kids. And because I've had people
Oh, yeah.
ask me that, oh, maybe she wants to run away because your rules are so strict. I'm like, honey, the rules we had was don't hurt other people and don't kill the animals. Like, she didn't have this giant amount of rules, like, it's not you will be Stepford over here,
Right.
But because we were able to get that therapeutic involvement so early, and the therapist was, real helpful about guiding me on how to deal with her and how not to escalate her behaviors, we actually had a relatively peaceful existence, all things considered, considering her
Right.
level of callous and unemotional traits.
Right.
So that is probably the only reason we got to her being 15 before she started trying to murder me,
Right.
Had that not taken place, and she not been able to get those therapeutic interventions, I hate to think what her behaviors would have looked like.
Yeah.
And probably much, much earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I've definitely we as parents of children with conduct disorder feel like a constant failure, right? Oh, sorry, I'm trying to move I didn't want to catch on the cord, or that was I'm already sideways. I don't want to be in the dark too.
I don't know how to turn mine sideways, or I would, just so you wouldn't be alone.
Oh, solidarity. Yay. Actually, I want to be like, I'm trying to crawl up wait, now how do I, because it's bad. I'm trying to crawl up which is weird because the shots are not only am I sideways, the shots are flipped. To make it look like I'm going up the side of the screen, I have to go down the other side of the screen. Oh man.
We love technology.
Okay. So now I got distracted by the sideways in the dark thing. So I was like, oh my God, what was I starting to say?
That we all feel like failures.
Oh, yeah. Thank
Because
you.
no matter what we do, it's not enough.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I guess at this point, right? I mean, and my success, my story is a success story too, right? So my kid is doing really well, despite the fact that we didn't get the information we needed until, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, right? I mean, and I'm still learning information about it as well. So, but he's great. He's not a criminal. He's not like, I don't need to worry about him. You know what I mean? Like all of that stuff. But parents like us, we feel like so much of a failure, so much of a failure. And it feels like if we had done these 57 million things a different way, then maybe it would have turned out, and all of that stuff. But I definitely have had friends of mine point out, like, no, consider what might have happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
Consider how he might have turned out if he hadn't been your son. Right. And have you guys ever seen Shameless, the US version?
Yes.
Okay. So my son is 95% Carl.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, just not he never peed in, he was never like peeing all over the house, but which they oddly dropped after the first season. I have no idea why the writers just were like, we're going to show him peeing on everything, and then no longer. And it's just like, just drop that. Like, all right, okay. But like, he is 95% Carl. And I had mentioned that to my son, and I was like, dude, this character is like 95. You're 95% that character. And then like the very next episode, he was wearing an outfit that was exactly like something my kid would have worn, and I was like, all right.
Funny.
Yeah, it was. But I mean, it was. I did get to see a little bit of how he would have turned out if he had not had an active, involved, engaged parent, right? And instead was sort of, left to run loose on the streets of friggin', wherever. I mean, Chicago, but that was where Shameless was. But like, it was actually kind of a gift, you might say, to see how he might have turned out if he had not had me as a parent. And so I think that's probably, the same thing for you. Like, she would have turned out so much worse if she didn't have you and didn't have your lawyer mind and, all of those things. Like, she would probably have been much more harmful, shall we say.
Right. I mean, the interesting part with her is she is we have information for 2 generations ahead of her to see
Right.
very clearly. Because,
Yeah.
we see the, her maternal grandfather was executed for murder, actually murder for hire, and there's
So he was an
long legal
assassin.
history. I don't think he did that all the time, but in that particular case, yes.
Sure.
um,
Just a little assassination on the side. It's my side hustle.
just a little moonlighting over here. Yeah, and we see the criminal records of her, her grandmother and her mother, and then realize, she has very much seems to be pretty close to the same level of callous and unemotional traits as her mother, but she has a much higher IQ than her mother. So she has the ability to really plan and execute in ways that her mother never was able to. And so she really could have, it could have really turned out much differently. I'm hoping, she had all those years of therapeutic interventions, and hopefully as she grows, she'll, choose to make better decisions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's, we're sort of, science seems to have, or let me rephrase that. The people I know in the scientific community all seem to have come to a consensus that psychopathy is a neurodevelopmental disorder. And I think that at this point, like, there is no other explanation for this, right? And one of the things that is really, really important for people to remember about a neurodevelopmental disorder, notice the word developmental, right? Like, their brains are slower growing. And yes, there may be parts that are malformed that will just not, like, they may never become unmalformed, right? Like, we might not be able to change, but there's still other things that we can do to maybe not speed up their development, but, to sort of, like, when you were, when I was you guys wouldn't know when I was a kid and broke my arm. You didn't know me then. Anyway, when I was a kid, I broke my arm and had to have a cast on, right? And then cast comes off. Oh, shoot. Hang on. Plug in my, okay. There we go. All right. This time I was smart and brought the charging cord with me. Yay. But anyway, so I broke my arm was in a cast, and then the cast comes off, and it's just this poor little weazened, thing, and you got no strength, and you have to do like all this, all this rehab and all of that stuff, right? But like, you can do that with the brain too. You can exercise those parts that need to be, strengthened. Like, if somebody has difficulty reading, the key is not to just say, don't read, right? Like, figure out what the problem is, help them, right? Do they need glasses? Do they, yeah, exactly. And so I think, that same thing could be done with the brain if we just know, like, let's say we we wouldn't throw a child in an MRI, but you know what I mean, right? Just gently place him. Yes. Anyway, you could put the kid in the MRI, right? And then you could see and obviously we would have to have a team of radiologists who specialize in this, because your general, like, it would have to be a really, really specific specialty, right? Sort of like bespoke or artisanal radiology or something like that, right? But you'd have to have, people who could do that because that's not something that they're typically trained to do. But if you saw, right, you're like, oh, wow, I noticed that the, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is really much smaller than it should be, or I noticed the striatum is enlarged, or I noticed this is that, or you know what I mean? Like you could look at the brain, or not you, one who happens to be a radiologist could look at the thing and be like, okay, well, it looks like his hippocampus is shrunken. Therefore, you want to do X, Y, and Z to see if you can get the things in the hippocampus to engage more, right? And I don't know what that would entail. I don't know what that would look like, but theoretically, if we had some sort of visual confirmation and we know what the parts of the brain do, we could at least experiment, because like at a certain point, you can't wait to have all the answers to help people.
Right.
Like if you do that, we'll be dead. It's like COVID, right? We had to start sharing everything right away, and we had to start doing something even if we didn't know what to do, because failing to act was going to cause more harm. And that's, I think if we've learned anything from COVID, right? Like that's the lesson. The lesson is, if we all work together, if we all share the information we have, and if we're all willing to experiment and see what happens, we could stop so much bad from happening in the future. Like everything should be open access, research. Like people shouldn't have to pay to read that. The researchers should also get paid for their work, by the way. There's a whole big can of worms around that too, which I think we should probably save for another, episode. But like,
yeah,
it's all like, it's not a good system, but if everybody worked together.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And to be sure you never miss an upload, make sure you turn your notifications on. And please come join us on social media so we can continue these conversations in between episodes. You'll find us at Hypoxia Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.